Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Talk to an Angel, Crucial Connections to Early Stage Capital. And now please welcome the Chairman and President of the MIT Enterprise Forum, Joe Hedzima.
Welcome to the MIT Enterprise Forum's 29th global broadcast. We're broadcasting tonight from Kresge Auditorium on a very rainy MIT campus in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We have almost 500 people here in the audience. And tonight's program is being received by a record 58 venues throughout the United States and the world. For tonight's broadcast, we expanded our outreach far beyond the MIT Enterprise Forum chapters and the MIT alumni clubs that usually participate. Joining us tonight are local angel groups, university entrepreneurship centers, business incubators, community entrepreneurship groups, and other regional economic development centers, quite a collection of organizations. To all of you, we say welcome and thank you. We hope you enjoy tonight's world-class programming and that you participate in future broadcasts. For the last 28 years, the MIT Enterprise Forum has connected technology entrepreneurs and stimulated entrepreneurial networking and economic growth around the globe. The 24 MIT Enterprise Forum chapters produce more than 300 events annually, reaching thousands of budding and seasoned entrepreneurs, as well as the networks that support them. Tonight's program would not be possible without the long-term partnership of the MIT Enterprise Forum global sponsors. These include EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, Goodwin Procter, Ropes & Gray, and Wilmer Hale. Thank you for your ongoing contributions to the MIT Enterprise Forum global community. We couldn't do it without you. Further, we thank our special broadcast sponsor for tonight, the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation. The Kauffman Foundation's commitment to fostering both education and entrepreneurship are an ideal match with the mission of the MIT Enterprise Forum, and we thank them for their support. And now let me introduce tonight's moderator, MIT alum James Geschweiler. James is chairman of the Angel Capital Education Foundation and is managing director of Common Angels here in Boston. He's uniquely qualified for helping us discover how we can all connect with those crucial early stage investors. James, the floor is yours, and thank you for moderating tonight.
Thank you, Joe. And welcome to everyone tonight, and thank you for joining us remotely as well. We wish we were where you were, especially if it were drier. But we're not going to let the rain dampen our spirits or enthusiasm for entrepreneurship. We're going to take the next hour here and talk about practical matters for financing your venture. First half, we're going to talk about financing with angels for the entrepreneur. In the second half, we're going to talk more about, from the investor side, how to work with those same entrepreneurs if you've been an investor or are thinking about being an investor. And we did a satellite broadcast last year from Kresge as well that focused more on the big picture, how much angel money is out there, what does it all look like, and some of the slides that have been updated from that presentation are in your program if you were here in Kresge, or in your materials if you're at one of the remote sites. And I'd like to start by turning to John May, who is now chairman of the Angel Capital Association. And John, could you tell us a little bit about what's going on with angel investing nationally and what some of these big picture trends are, just to get us started here?
I think the main thing to be aware of is that there are many, many, many kinds of angels, individual, ad hoc groups, and structured angel groups. What we'll try to do tonight among the panel members is to represent the growing group of structured angel groups, pledge funds, networks, pooled capital that entrepreneurs should look toward to fill this capital gap that we've been watching over the last year evolve as VCs went upstream. Average size venture capital fund today is about $209 million. Average size transaction is $5, $6, $7 million, leaving a lot of room after friends, family, and fools, as we say among ourselves, that generally tap out in the low hundreds of thousands of dollars. What we're really looking toward is who can be the professional, the mentor capital, this assistance to you all as entrepreneurs when you've got a high growth company that needs 6 figures or low 7 figures, and we're struggling to see, are you venture capital backable, or are you going to only deal with these mentor capitalists as you grow? So tonight we want to be helpful to people outside the auditorium as well as those here in Boston to sort of understand what is the way to approach an angel investor, what kind of rates of return are they looking for, and how you should do due diligence and look to research the best angel for you, just as they will be looking at you as to whether you're an investable deal. And so I hope tonight we'll all play different roles. One of my roles is to try to talk about this evolution of structured angel groups that have been represented in the Angel Capital Association.
Okay, now before we get to that, John, you use the term angel and venture capitalist. Tell us, how can you tell the difference? I run into some guy or woman and their business card says such and such ventures. Are they an angel or are they a venture capitalist? How can I tell?
The real differentiator, of course, is that if it's an individual investing their own funds, not being paid to manage other people's money, who are usually members of the National Venture Capital Association, that's where you really get the difference. You find that ad hoc groups of angels or people that belong to the Angel Capital Association are managing their own money, their after-tax dollars. They're trying to get psychic reward as well as financial reward, and they're different than the 900 or so members of the National Venture Capital Association, which raise hundreds of millions of dollars from endowments and are really operating as a guild, a cottage industry to manage portfolios for other people, maximize financial rates of return. And so although we're starting to have, as you know, James, angel groups with websites and staff and look a little more like VCs, most people in the audience would find that they're going to talk to high net worth individuals, friends and family, to write checks from their own pocketbook, doing it their own way, and customize the term sheet, as opposed to VCs, which we'll talk about tonight, that tend to be more structured in the way they operate.
Okay, Bob, now John keeps pointing at you, so you have to reveal yourself here as being both an angel investor and a venture capitalist. Tell us a little bit about your background and what's the difference? When do we know that you're an angel investor and when do we know you're a venture capitalist?
It depends how much I like the deal that I'm being shown. Now, I've been a venture investor for, I don't know, 15, 20 years now. And my comments tonight come from personal experience, both investing as a venture capitalist over the years, also being an angel investor in between various periods.
And you've been at some big firms.
And I've been at some, I was at a firm called Chase Capital Partners and Flatiron Partners. I have a new firm now called Contour Ventures. You can reach me at bob@contourventures.com.
With the good deal.
Already
good
breaking
deals.
our no infomercial rule here, yes.
But, and I've done both the angel and venture stuff during, I say pre-burst, during the bubble times in the 90s, after the bubble burst, so the comments
So
come from
when
observations
have
from
you
both
been an
ends.
angel and when have you been a VC? Is angel when you're good, a VC when you're bad?
In between funds. And a lot of VCs you know, who run very large firms, dabble on the side and make personal investments when they find a young company, like a lot of people I met here in the audience tonight. They love something, but it doesn't fit their firm, or it's too early, but they just think it's so neat that they'll put $25,000, $50,000.
Okay, so what we're hearing first is an angel by definition is investing out of their own checkbook. A VC has someone else's money.
That's right.
Can you be a VC if you don't have other people's money?
Sure you can. You could have a lot of your own money and put up an office sign and invest the pool. Sometimes you invest on behalf of other friends or a pledge club. But the biggest differences if you, between sort of angel and VC or how you want to think about the differences for the audience and the people raising money, I think of three things: timing, size, and attention. So from a timing standpoint, when you come to a firm like ours or many of the other firms that you know around town, it can be anywhere from a 1 month to 6 month process to get through their introductions, their diligence, their competitive analysis, and finally get a check. It can often happen faster, but it can be 1 to 6 months process. And that can be a long time for some of you, and you have to factor that in. When you go to angels, it can be very quick. You can sit down with someone over breakfast. They'll love something you say, and it's their money, not the firm's money. They don't have 5 other partners to go back to and caucus with every week to review the deal like a larger firm does. And they might make a decision over coffee and write you a check for $25,000. That happens a lot. They may not, but it can happen a lot faster. And then if you tap into people like that, if they like it, they tend to know 3 friends who like it, like your group of people. And we've all done that. If I love something, I usually have 1 or 2 friends that say, hey, I did this, maybe you want to look at it. So
Okay,
you can,
so timing is definitely
So
a
that
big
can
issue.
that can happen faster. Second, in terms of size. Now, if you need to, you need to be honest with yourself how much capital you need when you're fundraising. If you need somewhere less than $500,000 or a couple $100,000 to get yourselves going, you can solve that pretty effectively with angel capital, with 3, 4, 10 people who spread to their friends and write small checks each, and you can accomplish the amount you need. If your long-term plan is for a whole lot more capital, then you'll tap out the angel network, and maybe you need to go to VCs
So
instead.
timing, size.
And attention. Angels, by definition, they tend to be wealthy, so they can write you these checks, but they do other things. This is not a full-time avocation for them. It's a hobby. It's a craft. They do it for fun. Psychic reward, as you said, and that's very real. So you might want to get to them, but because they're rich angel investors, they're off on their yacht for 2 months in Europe, and you can't get to them. Or maybe you got them into your investment, but now it's 6 months later, and you need some more, and you can't find them because they're at their other home. So attention. They can be hard to track down. They can be a little bit like herding cats.
As opposed to the VC who's
As
on
the
12
VCs
boards,
who have
and
a
so they're
fund,
always
and
available.
it's a full-time job. They're paid to manage the money, and it's their job to make good investments, grow them, and get out. And so they're very motivated, and they will meet with you anytime and pay attention to you.
Make note of that. David, tell us a little bit about yourself. You've raised angel money, you've raised venture money, you've raised venture money, you've raised angel money.
Right. Well, I've had a real job for about 3 months just out of graduate school, and that didn't agree with me, so I've started 6 companies since then. And I'm on
Chronically unemployable.
chronically unemployable. You know,
And your latest one is an online backup software company.
right, back up your PC for $5 a month,
Right.
Carbonite. So you can see some crazy cartoons on the internet if you
Are you
go
the
to our
artist for
website.
that?
I'm not.
Okay.
I won't tell you who it is, but
So you've raised money from many different sources. You've had companies in telecom, a couple of them.
right. Yeah, generally in software, telecoms, and those kinds of things.
And so when have you been able
I've
to tell the difference?
Well, I've almost always started with angel money, and then in most cases followed on with venture capital. And my view of that experience has changed as I've gotten older. You know, Cynthia and I were just discussing before we started that, you know, when you're a young entrepreneur and some big shot VC comes in and gives you some money and then comes into your board meeting and may make some offhand comment that, you know, is not well considered, but as a young entrepreneur, you sit there and you say, oh boy, he must know everything. He's rich and he's got a big venture capital firm. I better go run off and do what he suggested. And then you find out, you know, subsequently that this was just a sort of an off-the-cuff remark, and you went scurrying off in the wrong direction. And now I guess I flip the other way, which is I tend to ignore most of that advice.
That's okay. Full disclosure, we're investors in his company. He ignores me too. So, Dave, why don't you think about this? I sent him an email. Great idea. I'll take it under consideration.
So you learn the hard way. And I have to say, we have some terrific angels in my newest company. And I decided I wanted to get the new company going with angel money because there are a number of these investors who individually have invested in my previous businesses and made money and were anxious to get back in. And it's been a very pleasurable experience this time. And I have to say, you know, for all of the talk that VCs do about all the value added they can bring other than money and so forth, most of which is BS, that's not the case with angels, because angels, by and large, are entrepreneurs like me. These are guys who have started and run companies. They've actually been in my shoes. And it's the way the venture capital industry was about 20 or 30 years ago, when the guys who started venture capital firms actually had run something. And unfortunately today, you know, what you find are people who came out of business school and have never run anything. They've just worked their way up through investment banking. And they have no idea what it's like to be in the shoes of a CEO who's trying to juggle payroll and personnel issues and product issues and customers and all kinds of other things, and the complexities of that. And so that's where I think a lot of the bad advice comes from, to be honest with you. So
Well,
it's,
and you're raising an important issue, which is fit and criteria. And I want to come back to John for a quick second here. We have 5 key questions we want to address tonight. And the first one is how to find angels. So John mentioned in passing about angel groups. Can you quickly tell us, first of all, how to find individual angels, and then tell us a little bit more about these groups?
There are many, many more angels who operate individually. I call them Lone Rangers or in ad
How
hoc
many?
groups. Think about it. In the United States, there's an estimated 8.5 million millionaires in the United States, all capable of writing this kind of check. There are probably 250,000 to 500,000 that have been business angels or non-friends and family backers of companies over the last couple of years. And in the structured angel group, in the Angel Capital Association, we have, let's say, 10,000. So the predominant members of these groups are concentrated in some key cities in the United States, but they're the minority. The ones you'll meet will tend to be cashed out entrepreneurs, high net worth professionals in your community. There will probably be people that you can find through lawyers or accountants or incubators or tech councils that know who the mentors are, know who the leaders of the industries are that have made money in your region and are recycling it.
So
But in
one
general,
of the key ways to find people is networking.
yeah, networking is key. Networking to find out who the contacts are in your community for these kinds of people, and then going to places like the Angel Capital Association website, angelcapitalassociation.org, so that if you're looking for the groups that have decided to hold monthly meetings and have decided to look for these more structured or pre-VC kind of opportunities, that's where you'll find them at that directory.
Right. Okay, let's come back to ACA in a second, but I just want to focus on this issue about finding individuals. Now, you mentioned networking. Dave, you've raised money
Yeah.
from a lot of individuals. Why is networking so important? Why does networking work? Because I have entrepreneurs say, James, great, you tell me how to network, fine. I don't know where to start. Who do I talk to?
right.
Why should I do that?
Well, I'm thinking back to, when I was 22 years old and starting my first company, and my lawyer was the beginning of my network. I didn't know anybody in the business community, and, I had a lawyer who was a high-tech kind of lawyer, and she was kind of the person that began to introduce me to the community. But when people invest in you, I mean, the worst time to meet somebody is when you're going out to try to get money out of them. It's nice to have a relationship with that person that you've built up around a serious interest in what they're doing and their interest in sort of what you're doing.
So mutual interest, and
Mutual
I'm hearing
interest.
trust.
It is a matter of trust because, it's a loaded situation when you come in and you say, hi, Dave, friend, why don't you invest in my new company? And that's the first words out of your mouth. You've got an agenda, which is find some money. And, that immediately puts me in a sort of a defensive situation, which is, yeah, of course this guy's going to be nice to me. He wants me to give him some money. And it's much better if this is somebody who I've had some conversations with in the past, talked about windsurfing, talked about technology, whatever. And then all of a sudden the guy comes back and says, guess what? I'm starting a company. Would you like to hear about it? And, the old adage, which is, if you're asking for money, ask for advice. And
So there's one important tip. Ask for
Right.
advice first.
yeah, ask for advice. And in fact, most people like me who have started businesses love to give advice because this is what we love to do.
You're
So
here.
I'm here, right. I'm not getting paid. So that's why we do it. And we're, it's in your blood. I mean, it's why none of us are sitting around retired because you can't sit still. You finish one company, you start another.
Okay. Now, John, can you quickly tell us a little bit about more of this thing called groups? We've got a couple slides here about trends in venture financing, and you talked about the growth of groups. Can you give us a minute on what these groups are and why are there more of them?
Yeah, over the last 10 years, what we found is that I believe it's as much for risk minimization as it is for yield enhancement. Individual angels have decided that they don't know enough to do the due diligence and to understand and take the time to do everything they should to have a good portfolio of these private companies. So they take part of their net worth, 5, 10, 20% of their net worth, and they then band together with other individuals who might know other things. The wireless guys get together with the medical device guys. the people who understand enterprise software get together with people who understand off-the-shelf software, and they decide to combine their money to get the leverage of talking to the entrepreneur about more dollars, but also to share the due diligence and the how do we decide the risk profile. So what we found is that there are about 100 to 150 groups around the United States. They tend to meet monthly. They tend to be all accredited investors, which we'll talk about for the entrepreneurs as to whether that's a good target to go to, these people who have $1 million to invest. And the groups seem to be doing pretty well because they're a focal point. They have a brand, they have a website, they have maybe a staff or a volunteer, so that it makes a more efficient market. The poor entrepreneur meeting with 15 individual angels, it's a pretty inefficient and lonely way to go about things. What we hope is by creating these groups, there's a place to go to that's one-stop shop to present to 15, 20, 30 angels.
Now, Cynthia. Cynthia's background's a little bit different. She's started a couple companies in life sciences and was chair of the Massachusetts Biotech Council. And but you've raised money from individuals and very large venture firms in the past. What's your perspective on this this split, angels versus VCs? How can you tell them apart? And particularly in life sciences, when should you be thinking about one's a good fit or the other's not a good fit?
Well, James, generally in the life sciences, it's venture capital as your key.
But I heard biotech's hot. I want in on biotech.
Biotech's hot, but it's got a long lead time to an exit outcome for the investors. And so when you're looking at also along 8 to 10 years till, if you're in biotech, it's a drug discovery. If you're lucky, it's 8 to 10 years. And you're looking at tens of millions of dollars, if not north of 100 million of private equity. I founded a company called Viacord in '93, and it took us, we were an anomaly because we were a health biotech service business. So we had revenues, and we got to cash flow break.
And what the VCs think of that?
And
Life
they didn't know how to
sciences?
handle it. You know, in the 90s, they said, we don't know how to value a biotech company with revenues, you know, at this stage. You know, we're looking for a spin story, billion-dollar vision. And so we didn't fit, we were an anomaly. We didn't fit the recipe for the classic venture funding until the bubble burst in the technology sector. And so when high-tech technology burst, all of a sudden the VCs started, in the biotech arena, started looking at revenue-producing businesses and shorter time cycles for an exit, and we came into favor. So it took a long time.
But this was still
for us
very
to
much a
raise.
VC deal
It was a VC deal.
because of the dollars involved and the
absolutely.
timeline involved.
Absolutely. And, you know, for the Viacord business, which we ended up combining with another company and creating another company called ViaCell. Viacord banks stem cells from umbilical cord blood for any expectant family to save those stem cells from the placenta and umbilical cord blood to be used in the future, should they ever be needed for a family transplant or wherever stem cells apply. But we created a cellular medicines company called ViaCell by combining with another company that could expand these cells and create essentially a cellular medicine. That big vision combined with ours enabled us to close on 7 million, 11 million initially, but it then quickly, we took advantage of the window, and the window opened for us. What's the window? You know, all of a sudden, the venture capital market, biotech is hot. And we got lucky, and 6 months after we closed on our first funding, which, oh, by the way, took 7 years from the time I started the business to close that. 6 months after the first 11, we were able to raise 50 million, and then a subsequent north of 100 million till we went public a year ago.
Okay, so one of our key questions here is what is and isn't a good fit? Now, am I hearing you right that if for the biotech entrepreneurs in the audience, you're saying, I hear $50 million, I'm hearing angels aren't a good fit for you?
I'm saying from a realistic standpoint, you're really looking toward the venture capital market. And you may be able to find a consortium, a large size angel group that can help you start off the door, but get started. But you're looking at government grant monies. You're looking at perhaps a one-stage angel network to come in and then move towards your venture funding. But
So-
you've got to
so-
have a lot of ducks lined
But back
up in
to
the life
Bob's
sciences.
point about dollars, if it's a lot of dollars, you're already putting yourself out of the angel realm.
Yeah, but I think the point, James, is she's making is that she went 7 years without it. So, you know, that's where the angels come
But
in.
she had revenues.
We had
Well,
revenues. We had revenues and we got to cash
but
flow break
now we flipped into the era where VCs want to see revenues. So how do you get to revenues if you don't have a product? And how do you get a product if you don't have money
Let me
to,
answer that.
to build the product?
Let me answer that because James knows the secret. I got lucky because I got to be the angel. And I got to be the angel because I invested in a very simple business when I had a corporate day job and not much money at all. I wasn't one of those wealthy angel investors. I happened to get lucky and co-invest a $10,000 investment with some equity that turned into $400,000. So that gave me the walk money from my job when I got my idea
And was
that I could
was
take
that the coal barge?
No, that wasn't the coal barge, but it was a regional business journal.
Low tech.
But I did get to
But it was low
invest.
tech, if I remember.
It was low tech.
Okay, and we want to come back to if you're a low tech entrepreneur, how you find money, and if you're not in Boston or Silicon Valley. So,
And it's out there.
yeah.
But I think, James, it is important to understand for people that the way I look at it is entrepreneur is to small business as angel is to rich person. There are very few small businesses that can ever grow to be a big business, to be a high growth business. It's very rare to have an idea that gets 10 employees, 100 employees, that makes money beyond the lifestyle of the entrepreneur. So too, there are very, very few high net worth individuals who are willing to take the time and money that it takes to be an angel investor as opposed to a real estate investor, a hedge fund investor. In other words, what you're trying to do, and I think in your case, is right size the quantity of money, but also the expectation of the investor with the opportunity. And there are very few high-tech companies that make it. In the VC business, very few ever go public.
Right.
So I think the main thing for an entrepreneur to realize is what's on the other side of the table. What's the expectation of the other money?
Okay, so let's stay on this question about fit for a couple more minutes. I was asked out in the lobby by someone, he said, well, one of the things I really want to know about is what are the criteria for an angel investor? So you're saying it's not just that you have money.
A, it's not that you just have money. B, people should realize that almost all angel money is spent within 1 or 2 hour drive time of the home. So I come from Northern Virginia for this event. It's wonderful, but I had a great time meeting with hundreds of entrepreneurs out in the reception because I could gleefully say, I don't invest in Boston. And so when you get inundated with opportunity, you have to, as an angel, have criteria. You have to decide, is it drive time? Almost every angel invests in something that they understand, not something that you woo them is sexy, is hot.
So it's do you know something?
So
Do you
I
know
really
something
do
about
think
my
it
business?
takes, just as a VC
Yeah.
raises money and says they have a thesis, I think most angels will, in their heart, say they only pull the trigger.
Stay close to home and stick to your knitting.
Yep.
And,
So-
that's, a
so
better,
if-
and that's a better investor for you.
Because they're local.
I wouldn't know anything about what you were doing stem cell, and I wouldn't have been a very productive investor for you.
What other things, Dave, have you looked for when you've talked to investors? When you're meeting someone, you've networked, you're standing there, talking to them, and you want to make a decision whether or not you even want to give them your pitch. How do you know if they're good for you?
Well, if the person has spent their entire life in biotech, I don't know beans about biotech, so we're going to have a hard time communicating right away. And
your business has nothing to do with biotech.
My
except
business
maybe
has nothing to
backing
do
up
with
the
biotech.
data.
so I would view that person as a very poor prospect.
Now, I did have an
But-
investor tell me recently, I just took this course at Harvard Extension School in organic chemistry, and this biotech stuff's really cool. I think I'm going to get into it. You know something? This is a biotech company? I'm interested. Are flags going off in your head? What do you do as an entrepreneur?
Well, I would like to have people invest in my company who really understand what I'm doing. And there are lots of angels out there, and I think after a period of time you don't have a lot of trouble raising angel money. But it's a bad idea to have somebody, even if the person's throwing the money at you, it's a bad idea to have somebody who's investing in you for the wrong reason. Because for one thing, they may wind up being a pain in the neck, calling you all the time because they don't understand what's going on. And you know, that's distraction. It undermines your confidence. There's a whole bunch of reasons why you don't want that to happen. And the other thing is you want to be careful, you know, not to invite, you know, jerks to the family dinner. I mean, that's kind of what it's about too.
So these
And-
people are co-owners in your business with
Yeah,
you.
I like to get to know them a little bit before, you know, before they get involved. Because my personal style is let's be completely open with all these people and let's use them. Let's help them, you know, bring them into the company, tell them what's going on, find out who they know, who could be helpful to us, because they're interested in what we're doing too. They're not just investing because it's the money. I've never seen an angel investor yet who just looks at it and says, "Oh, I'm going to calculate my rate of return and I'm going to go with it that way," because most of them could easily turn their money over to a money manager and go, you know, spend their time on the beach. They're doing it because it's in their blood. And they love doing it, and they love meeting young entrepreneurs and new entrepreneurs and rooting for them and mentoring them and so forth. And that's the kind of person you want to get involved
Okay,
in.
and
your
Bob-
company.
Bob, danger signs?
I want to make a comment on fit first. I agree with what we've all just said. However, when you come to pitch some of these angel groups, like the one James runs, or I happen to be a member of New York Angels as well, you'll come into the room.
And that's www.ny
No,
angels.
it's okay. There is a website. Do a search. So you'll come into the room, and there'll be 40, 50, 60 people there. And they're all successful business people who do this for a couple days a month on the side. And they'll come from all walks of industry, real estate, successful people from real estate and biotech and information technology and publishing and media. And you'll end up having interest from all those sectors in your deal. Even though the media person may not know anything about biotech, he or she's there because they also want diversification in their own portfolio. And that's fine for your investment. So you might end up having 10 of the New York group invest in your company and from 4 different industry backgrounds. And they all can be helpful to you because if they've been a successful business person, sure, they may not know your science specifically, but if they built and sold a large company or are running a big company, there's a lot of general business practices which are applicable to all industries through growth
But are
phases.
you saying
And you
that
just have to access the angels and call them for advice at the right time for what you're going through. I mean, hiring practices and growth and doing acquisitions, that's somewhat common across a lot of industries, and they can all be helpful to you. And it's just good to get, as someone said, get to know them and so know who to call at what points in time.
Now, but are you saying that in part because that's an organized group and you're not going to get these
I think
concerns?
Yeah,
that
that's
Dave
an
was-
that's
That
an
is
organized
different.
group,
I
and they're
mean,
there because they want to
that's
find
right.
investments and get some
and
diversification.
there is a group to manage that
It's
process.
a more efficient market.
Yeah, and it's efficient. You can pitch, 50 at one time and get 10 in very quickly.
So-
But the
Cynthia, you were
reason
gonna-
that works is because you've got somebody like James
That's
who's
right, organizing.
professional,
That's
who's
right.
organizing and who's doing all the legwork on the deal. I mean, if you had to deal with the actual individual entrepreneurs, and some of those guys could be very difficult to deal with. A guy like James or you buffers the
That's right.
entrepreneur from
Yeah,
from
think of what
those
happens if we had all the
individuals.
limited partners of the venture fund calling. Yeah. Cynthia, you were going to add to this?
Well, you got to look at it from the entrepreneur's perspective, though. I mean, when you bring in an angel, I don't care whether it's a large group of angels that come together, or it's an individual, or a venture capital partner. And especially as you're looking at bringing them into your company, that relationship is very important. You've got to look at the added value of that investor, because you may have choices, and I wouldn't settle on one until you have a comparative. I mean, it's just like dating. I mean, you want to have a couple of irons in the fire, a couple in the queue before you
I
decide
don't
which
really
path
want to
you're going
date
to go
Bob,
down.
actually, now that you mention it. But
And you have to make 2 more points. I always advise entrepreneurs, never take all your money from one source. You might meet a great angel, a billionaire, and he'll offer you $1 million to get started, and you're totally beholden to him or her, and they then control the cards.
Well-
and it's good to diversify
Okay,
your sources.
hold-
If you can. Now, having
yeah.
said all this, raising money is really hard, right?
Pain in the butt.
So it's great for us
So
to
if you
offer
can't
these,
take it.
It's really great to offer all these lessons. Do this, don't do that. But you're out there saying, I'll take the money wherever I can get it. And you know what? That's right, too.
okay, I want
So-
to. Our 5th point is how to work together. So I want to come back to that. Cynthia, finish yours.
Yet, as an entrepreneur, if I'm looking at your venture firm or somebody else's venture firm, I'm going to say, who's the A player?
Right.
Where do I have the best chance of successful outcome? How can this venture partner, how do you, Bob, give me the better opportunity or the edge to go raise follow-on funding? What's your network like? And how deep are your pockets? Have you just raised a $350 million fund that, okay, so if you're going to put in $5 million here, can I count on you for another 10? You know, what are you looking at for a subsequent round? And so looking at those comparative investors.
Or the reverse. You only need $5 million, but they just raised a $300 million fund, so you better take $30 million and cut both ways.
Yeah,
Well, you know,
A good
take
problem
the
to
money.
have,
Take
but-
the money.
No, but James raises a good point. You take a very small investment from a very large venture firm, you don't get much attention later when you might want it because you don't show up.
Well, but the most important thing I think Cynthia's bringing up is you have to do homework and due diligence on the funding source
That's right.
as much as they're doing on you. To play the game of, I have to bend over and do all of this work to get their attention and not to do homework on their prior investments, the way they operate in the board, the way they are supportive other than financing, could get you in a really bad situation down the pike. So you have to do as much homework on the funding source, angel or VC,
Right.
as we should be doing on the entrepreneur.
And I think it should be really, I mean, it can be life or death.
Right.
I mean, it can absolutely be life or death on who is your venture fund or your angel fund based upon, do you have a shared vision for the long-term goals of your company and even
Patience.
short-term goals of your
Patience,
company?
greed,
Right.
exit. I mean, you have to talk about that before you get married.
And if
Not after.
exactly, and it is a marriage, and if you're going to be in that boardroom every 6 weeks and phone calls in between, who is it that you want at your table with? in
Okay,
that
so
You
relationship?
absolutely should do some diligence on the venture firm or the people you're going to take capital from, especially if they're going to be a large investor. It's so surprising to me how rarely entrepreneurs, when they're seeing us, how often they do not call the other CEOs that I've
in your
backed.
portfolio.
I offer to them, and you can look at the website and see what companies we sit in the boards of, but they often do not, and they should.
But angels should do the same. A legitimate angel should give you the name of their other investments, the CEO's contact
absolutely.
information, so you can double check if you do support after the closing.
Okay,
thi-
so
I
let's,
think on-
let's
I
So
think
that's
on-
big, I mean, most of the time the entrepreneur's sitting back there doing a jig because he's got somebody who's
Yeah.
giving him a term sheet.
Yeah, and he's not going
Heck
to
with
jinx it.
calling the CEO.
That's right.
okay, so let's do a time check. We're a little
Oh,
more than
wait a minute.
halfway, and we're also a little bit of halfway through our key questions. So just to recap quickly, we got 5 key questions we want to address for the entrepreneurs in this program. How to find angels. We talked about networking, and we're talking about angel groups, who are the minority of investors out there, but a growing set. You got websites, a directory. Next question, what is and isn't a good fit? And the big issue that's come up here is relationship, time, money, attention. Those are 3 key things, and doing diligence to see about the fit. We've talked a little bit about their third question, when to work with VCs, when to work with angels, and both, and I want to come back to it, but I really want to start talking about the fourth question, which entrepreneurs ask about all the time, how to pitch. How do you pitch to an angel? So, Bob, you've been on both sides of this. I want to start with you. Tell us how to pitch to an angel, how to pitch to a VC, and how are they the same or how are they different?
My answer might be different than yours, someone who's a pure angel or an entrepreneur. To me, it's the same. Whether I'm going to write a personal check or a check from an institution that I represent, I don't change my standards. My standards are still high. I have to love it in either case. Just tell me what you're going to do and why it's valuable and why will someone buy it from you.
And how do you want to actually see, very practical,
And
how do you
think of
want
the
to see
pyramid.
that presentation look or that
All right,
business plan?
assume I have a short attention span.
We know you do.
I have a, you know, you're
I'm
going to
glad
get.
you said it.
It's a VC.
We'll be very focused for 30 minutes. And of course, if we go longer, that means we liked it. Give me the summary up front. It's like when you write a plan, same when you speak it. Tell me the summary and then broaden from there. In the first 3 sentences, give me your elevator pitch. Here's what I'm building. Here's why it matters. It's a big market opportunity, and these are the kinds of customers that'll buy it.
Okay.
And then go from there.
Dave?
Well, let me continue on that thought and then come back to your original question. One of my techniques when entrepreneurs come to me looking for advice is I tell them to go away and write the ad. Do a full-page ad as if it were going to run in some magazine and bring it back to me, because if you can't write the ad, how the heck are you going to ever sell your product? And it doesn't have to look great, but it has to get the point across. And
Well, you have
obviously,
cartoons on your website.
we do.
So.
That's right. Now, going back to the other point, I think there is a distinction between pitching angels and pitching VCs. And partly that's because the reason we're here, in fact, is because angels and VCs are doing quite different things in the market today. An angel really looks for you to get the company from point A to the point where a VC can pick it up and go on with it. And one of the characteristics of the angel community that I think is a little different from the VC community is a lot of times the angels say, okay, here's $50,000 or here's $100,000, and a couple other people come in. They're maybe not looking to put any more in. Their idea is, okay, this is what I'm going to commit to this. I'm going to roll the dice on your company, and don't come back to me looking for more. I may be tapped out. That's all I want to put into this deal. And so when you go to the angel, I think it's a good idea to show them how your money is going to get them from where you are today to the point where your company is going to be financeable by somebody else who has different criteria.
Or break even. Because that financing event may be how many years away, Ms. Fisher?
That's right.
If ever?
Or to some self-sustaining state. That's right. And you have to show how you can do it on their money, and that you will get to the milestones, because everybody knows today VCs are actually risk averse. So they want to see revenue. They want to know, are there real customers who are willing to pay money for your product before they invest? Are all of the major risks taken out of the technology? Have you actually built it? Does it actually work? Can people vet it? And so forth. So if I'm raising angel money, I'm going to say, okay, if this company is going to require, say, $10 million to get to break even, I'm going to show how your $2 million is going to get to the point where this is going to look like a really attractive deal to the guy who's going to put up the other 8. Now, the VC is looking at this and he's saying, I got to put $5 million to work in this deal or it's not worth my time to spend on it. That's why he's not interested in me in day one, because day one to the next major milestone is only $2 million deal. So he'd rather let the angel take care of that and then come in after all these other benchmarks have been hit and put his $5 million to work. So when you go to the VC, I've got to say, okay, I want to show you how I'm going to productively put $5 million or $10 million to work and get a really good return on it.
So there is a slight difference in the pitch
But
based
there is
upon the stage.
a even bigger difference at the angel level as opposed to, I think, the VC level, which is the dialogue about what does the entrepreneur want from us besides money. The entrepreneur knows in talking to a VC that it's a financial rate of return calculus. So even though they want them to be on the board, they want to open up doors to investment bankers, there's a certain inevitability to the financial relationship between entrepreneur and VC. But particularly with the non-VC-oriented angel relationships, which are most of you out there, there are only 3,000 venture transactions per year in the United States. 55% of those are in Northern California and in Boston. There are 50,000 structured angel group relationships in a year in the United
50,000
States.
angel
And there are
investments.
50,000 transactions as opposed to 3,000. So there's a lot more opportunity for you to deal with angels. But what I think people forget as entrepreneurs is that you should pitch the angel for what you get from them non-financially as well as financially. It's almost like money is fungible, and of course you have money, Mr. Angel, but what I want from you is your Rolodex, your shoulder to cry on, your access to people that would form my team. Usually you're at an earlier formative stage. You need to get the prototype done. You got to find the lawyer. You got to get the intellectual property attorney. If the angel can bring more than money, it produces a bond, I think, that lasts much longer than a pure bank or venture relationship. So I would hope that there'd be a lot more dialogue between you about what does each side bring besides money. And then my approach, at least what we do in the DC area, is say to the entrepreneur, you should have an elevator pitch, you should have a one-pager, you should have a two-pager, you should have an executive summary, you should have a business plan, you should have a business plan with appendices, and you should have a business plan with appendices with a due diligence binder. The key for you is to know which one to use with the right money source at the right time. If one of you gave me tonight the binder with the due diligence thing as the introduction and expected me to carry it home, you would have shot yourself in the foot because I'll trash it. You give me a one-pager that I put in my coat and I read it at the red light, you may have hooked me. So you have to have all of these things in your arsenal, then you have to know when to use them.
Cynthia, you had a couple tips here on how to pitch.
Yeah, John, I even go back to before the entrepreneur comes to the angel looking for that added value. I agree with you full-heartedly that the entrepreneur, when you're ready to go raise money, you've got to be totally prepared, because time is of the essence. And when it comes to the opportunity, it may be because that investor is going to fly to Europe and they have the 6 hours to read your business plan, look at your notes, read the exec summary, and it's one of maybe 8 in his or her briefcase on the way to Europe. I'd also like to circle back a bit, because I think part of also being prepared as an entrepreneur is that relationship, that advisory role. And I think critical that oftentimes young companies don't do is they don't yet put a board of advisors together. And you can put a casual board of advisors together. You don't have to pay for D&O insurance if they're not directors, but you can get a plethora of advice from some gray-haired folks that have been there and done that just want to see you succeed. And having a business advisory board, and if you have a science or a high technology company, also having a technology or a scientific advisory board that's separate, that advises you, is a great start to test your plan, test your ideas, provide a succinct description of your business.
Well, and that's the difference, too, between a general partner of a venture fund and an angel. An angel can take the time to be on an advisory board or just do the non-financial relationship. The venture capitalist is being paid to only spend time on boards of companies they invest in.
Okay.
So I think you're right. If you get James or David or I to sit on your board and not ask for money first, you may have a more powerful relationship than if you only look at us as a source for cash.
And back to the issue about finding angels, one of the principles we discussed earlier is trust or relationships or legitimacy. Now, David, you were going to chime in there about another thing on how to pitch.
I think I covered that.
Okay.
Yeah.
One other thing before we leave this question, I would encourage all the entrepreneurs in the audience, a couple quick tips, little tricks. Put your name, your phone number, and your email on the bottom of every page of every document you have. Cynthia mentioned the VC, but I would say the angel investor too, getting on the plane to Europe. Most entrepreneurs I see put that in the email. Well, that got separated from the thing I printed. And if I threw it in my bag on the plane to Europe, the next most likely place is it's on the back page. What's the most likely one to be ripped off when I go through security and I'm taking everything? Oh, who are these people? His name was Friend or something. Oh, I'll never find it. Oh, well. And you've lost you want your phone number there so they can just pick up the phone while they're waiting between flights or between meetings and call you and say, hey, when can we get together? And then the other is in your plan, Bob said, have a summary up front, very key, and have it cover 5 areas of risk: the people, the product, the market, the competition, and the financial. Those are your key elements to have in there. And if you're in biotech, regulatory.
Regulatory, competition, and intellectual property.
Intellectual property.
So you've got your patents identified and competing patents identified.
But I think it is important to remember that angels tend less to look at intellectual property and product than they do people. So I think that's another differentiator between angels and angel groups and the later stage VCs, is that we're willing to invest before there's even a finished product or a patent, whereas VCs tend to like having revenue, customers to call, the full management team. So it's risk reward. We're taking more risk, but we're also doing more due diligence on people. Whereas I think VCs have a tendency to assume that the founders will be replaced because they're going from 5 million to 100 million, and not everybody can handle that. At the angel level, we may never have a VC round. Only 1 out of 100 angel deals might ever see a VC in the United States. Right. So building it, assuming there's a VC behind, could really hurt you. Okay,
so for our final major question here, how to work together after funding. We've been talking a lot about venture capital as if it were there. Now, Cynthia's made some investments in other parts of the country. When you lived in other parts of the country, they were very local. And of course, John, the Angel Capital Association, has members in 46 states and provinces of Canada. Yep. So let's say you're in Alaska or Florida or some other place that's not Boston, inside the 128 corridor, so maybe Hopkinton. Headquarters of EMC, it's a tech city. Massachusetts' #1 tech city, Hopkinton, Mass., outside 495. You're not in the VC sweet spot. How do you, as an entrepreneur and as an angel investor, we want to answer this from both sides, work together after funding?
Well, I think that's all defined right up front when the funding comes in the door. Because typically, I don't know of a deal where your angel investor or your VC investor hasn't dealt with the terms on control, preferred rights, how the board seats are going to be defined when the investment comes in. And so how you work together post-funding is pretty much defined in that term sheet as far as where the controlling votes come into play. And especially if there are downstream investments, follow-on investments, you've got to think ahead 1 to 2 downstream investments of where the dilution comes in and where the control shifts will change. And I think that's a critical part of the component. So wherever you are in the country, whether it's a low-tech business or a high-tech business, I think it's worthwhile taking the time to ask others about term sheets. Maybe there's a CPA you work with that has done other deals and advised other companies, your lawyer. Maybe you know some fellow CEOs that angel has invested in, to ask them what kind of deals were done before. How does that relationship typically work post-funding?
James, I would even go stronger and say for 90% of the audience in the country ignore venture capital. Maybe 80% in this auditorium. But very, very few entrepreneurs ever see a venture capitalist, much get investment from a venture capitalist. People outside the United States never see a venture capitalist. An entrepreneur who's maybe taken friends and family or angel money should probably try to find a way to first depend upon bootstrapping, customer, and an exit through a corporate buyout. I guarantee you this game that we play of I'm going to get VC funding, and trust me, dear angel, angels die right and left and have the most frequent exit we have as an angel is bankruptcy and liquidation. And
It's a tax break.
and a tax write-off against our high net worth. I think most people should realize that we as angels are hoping the entrepreneur has a plan other than venture capital financing as the exit.
Okay, so a
Absolutely.
lot of the
Absolutely.
comments. Yeah, I'm coming to you. I'm coming back to you right now. A lot of the comments we've had tonight, I haven't broken it up as much between angel and investor as we said at the beginning, because a lot of these comments could have applied both ways. But this one about having enough money, Bob, I wanted to come back to you. I got 2 words for you: cram down. So you've been on both sides of the coin in good ways, but as an angel, we hear scary things about venture capital, but venture capitalists hear scary things about angels and recapitalizations and problem investors. Can you give me both sides of the coin here about the VC angel relationship when things don't go very well?
I don't know what you're talking about. So you're talking about, you use the word cram down, and venture firms and angels co-investing, living in the same house together, so to speak. As I always tell entrepreneurs when we're getting to know each other at the front end of a deal, it's really simple. If you do a good job and the company does well, it's all going to be fine.
You never look at the legal docs.
Yeah.
Everything is wonderful. We never look at the business plan.
And if it doesn't go well, it's going to stink for everybody. But I'll elaborate for a second. I want to comment on something Cynthia said. You talk about the term sheet and it has these rights and board control. Up front, I don't think entrepreneurs internalize the term sheet at all, and that's to be expected. And I understand that it's a 5 to 10 page document, a lot of black and white and words, and it talks about this and that. But it doesn't really. You don't read it every day and think about it when you're running your business every day. So it's very good to sit down with your investors, whether they're angels or VCs, and I actually don't even like distinction that way, whether they're individuals or institutional. That's how I think about the difference, individuals versus institutional, because institutional, I'm a fiduciary for all of my backers. It's just a little bit different perspective and size. So either side, sit down with them and just talk about what you expect from each other. Literally, very basic things, like, how often do you think you'll phone me? Will I talk to you every week? Literally, I bet most of you donors haven't thought about this when you started your company. Literally, how often do you want to hear from me? How often do you want me to call you? Do you like to get together? I ask my backers this. Do you want me to come see you once a month? Do you want to drop by? Are you a breakfast person? Are you a dinner person? Are you going to introduce some of your friends? Talk about those things, because then all the rest is easier. It's all about communication. You either communicate well and everything works from there, or you don't. Okay, so set that up, set those understandings up front. Now, the big question you asked, I had to get that off. So, the thing about working the same deal together. So, angels intend to invest first. They put some money in at some price, and the VCs come later, and the VCs are writing a bigger check. The angels may have come in for $500,000. Now the VCs are going to give you 10. And the VCs often take a perspective, not us, not my firm, of course, but other VCs often take a perspective, well, we have $10 million, and those guys wrote, 5 checks, and they're small. I don't really care what your rights are. And maybe your price was $2 a share, but I think the fair price is $1, and to heck with you, I'm going to cram you down. It's an expression you used, meaning I'm going to get a lower price, take away some of your rights.
Dilute you.
And now the angel says, but I have a contract. I bought my shares under a purchase contract too, and I have preferred stock, and we're not going into the depths of that, but I have rights. And the VC says, yeah, you have rights, but do you want my $10 million, or do you want to save the company yourself? Do you want to fund it all by yourself? There's a price to my money, and I'm going to take away some of your rights. But the VC can't get away with that as much today, because the angels are much more sophisticated as investors now than they were 10 years ago, right?
Yep.
And they're buying their shares with purchase contracts and legal agreements, which look just like venture agreements now. Pre-2000, and I did some of these, when you'd be an angel investor, you bought common stock, it wasn't much negotiated.
Wing and a prayer.
And you had no rights.
That's right.
But now, most of the angels I know, both as individuals or as groups, buy, very legalistic deals, preferred stock, lots of bells and whistles, preemptive rights, anti-dilution protection, so that when the VC comes later and says, if you want my money, there's a price and you have to give up these rights, then you have a negotiation. At least by the angel having that contract gets her a seat at the table to negotiate and discuss these
Wouldn't you
things.
agree,
And the
too, that
CEO's got to stick
The
up for
thing
you.
that the angels learned is that you have to have the assumption that you'll have multiple rounds of investment
Sure.
to protect yourself and to not just do a
Yeah.
check once, which the entrepreneur should be negotiating with the angel, how many rounds will you
That's
be
right.
with me?
When I've done angel investing and I bring a bunch of my friends in, and I tell everyone, be prepared to double down 3 times.
Yep.
Only write a check now that you're willing to do 2 more times. Because you have to do that, so that if the VC comes later and is going to set a price at half the price you paid and you feel bad about that, you will get a right to buy some of that too. Participate in the next round, and then you protect yourself.
And should we tell the entrepreneurs the secret that we have when we see their business plan? Which is we take their business plan and assume it's going to take twice as long,
And cost 3
and
times
it's going
as
to
much.
cost twice as much day one. So we have to reserve the cash to make up for the fact that we've overpaid.
All right, so could I just step in here as the
Isn't that
entrepreneur?
true, Cynthia?
None of this works.
Isn't that
No,
true?
no, it's at least 2 times the amount of money, and it takes twice as long. And in biotech now, people are even saying 3 to 4 times as long. So, and as much money. But let's go back to Bob, because, let's be realistic here, Bob. We are not all after the funding sitting at the table, holding hands, singing Kumbaya.
For a month. For a month.
Post the honeymoon period, how the board structure works out and control is very much an important part of the play. And, at the end of the day, we know the status of angel investing, venture investing, whether, like you said, it's individual or institution. It's the golden rule. It's the golden rule, right? And it's not. It's a
Be
different
nice to
one that you're
everybody.
thinking of. It is he who has the gold rules. And when it comes to when your back's up against the wall and the company needs more money and the additional rounds are going to come in, and that control at the board seat is very much so a part of what the VCs want when they come into a deal.
So they want board seats.
They want board seats
So-
and oftentimes control.
Well, but wouldn't you agree
Well,
that
So control is all, all right, but control is all, it's a math issue. How much money do you need and how much is your company
Absolutely.
worth? And
Absolutely.
if you need to raise, if your company's worth less than 10 million, you need more than 10, you're going to give up control.
Absolutely.
It's a math issue. okay?
Absolutely.
So,
And so
but what does that mean? What does that translate into a problem? Because if the manager's doing a decent job, the last thing the VC or the angel wants is you to toss the keys at them, right? They are hoping that you're going to do a good job, and they're hoping that to keep you. So I'm not sure where you're going with this.
Well, you know.
Because we're not there to pick a fight every
No,
time
no,
and to
no,
replace
no,
you.
no,
The
no.
last thing we
Well,
want to have to do is
Although
do that.
I have had venture capitalists sit in a meeting and say the first thing that they will do when they come into a company is replace the CEO, the entrepreneur CEO, because the formula is
The
to
first
have
thing they're going to do?
the formula.
Then I don't know why they
maybe
like
I-
the deal.
The West
Then I don't know
Coast
why they like
maybe
the
it's
deal.
West Coast.
That's the West Coast.
Management's usually one of my 5 key things, and I'm not coming into a deal the first month hoping to replace the management. So that's maybe someone else. You know?
But,
Well,
isn't this a good
oftentimes-
example of why
oftentimes-
most entrepreneurs shouldn't take outside money?
Pardon?
Most entrepreneurs are probably not sophisticated enough and emotionally together enough to understand what the world is like to take a
Right.
spouse.
Well, let's say, for instance, in a VC-backed business, I hope it was take a
I thought this was a finance
But-
program.
but-
this has been all about
but
relationships
about-
and
it is
dating.
about
This used to be a nice business.
Kumbaya.
Yeah.
But I think what is important to know that I think if you go in eyes wide open, as an entrepreneur who needs to raise tens of millions of dollars, you've got to give up control. You've got to realize that in subsequent fundings, you're going to eventually give up control, and it's about making the business successful and ability to succeed. And taking a smaller slice of a bigger pie is a really important thing as you're going for those levels of fundings. Now, if you've got a business that's got cash, it's a water company, it's a landfill that
It's a
generates
franchise, it's
returning
whatever.
revenues, and it just needs working capital from an angel for expansion. Sign me up. Let me know about it, because those are the
And
kind
those,
of businesses
and those
I
can
want to
be
invest in.
customized terms. They're not venture capital terms.
Right.
And you can find a way to have a dialogue, but you still need to do the due diligence.
Yeah.
You still need to have a business plan. You still need to have an honest dialogue. But you don't have to worry about the follow-on big equity financing taking you out.
Exactly, and it could
Angel
come,
doesn't want to run the company either.
it could come as, say you need a $50,000 note that can come in a 5-year payout with
royalties, whatever.
with some type of prime plus type of investment return and a piece of equity that, say, the entrepreneur doesn't want an angel long term. Great, take a defined exit up front, make it clean and simple, and those types
sort
of
of two
deals
types of
do
transactions
exist.
I have to say something, though, because I'm afraid that some of the semantics we're using could be misleading the audience. These issues of control and having to raise a lot of money, honestly, to me, have nothing to do with changing you or the management team. It's just about how much capital is needed to get there. And whether you say angel, venture, or the cash
Hybrid.
flow deal you talk about something else, it's just private equity. It's raising private capital in a company, whether it's from an individual institution or a larger deal. So if it needs a lot of capital, so that simply means that the investors own more than the majority, and the founder now owns less than the majority. But that doesn't change, honestly, that doesn't change how we work together. By definition, if I want to invest and put that much money in, it's because I really like the opportunity. And if I really like the opportunity, it's also likely because I really like the management team. Now, that can change because of performance, but I go into that with my eyes open. Maybe I think that the founder won't last 5 years, but 5 years is a long time, and we can make a lot of value together in less than 5 years. So control isn't about change. Some of the best deals that we ever did, and I've done dozens over the years, not all good, but some of the best ones, the original founder ended up owning, many of them ended up owning less than 10%.
Oh, right.
Usually because they had to raise a lot of capital. But they did great, and we did well together.
Okay, so we're coming up
think
on
that's
time
right.
here, but this has been a great discussion on and a lively one. I was concerned people might agree. Why I had that concern, I do not know. On our fifth question, which was how to work together after funding, and one of the key takeaways there is have shared expectations. Is that fair? I mean, you've got to talk, including how often am I going to call you, or how often you're going to call me, and to plan ahead, because there may not be more capital later. So you better be ready to be able to figure out in advance how you're going to work together. We are going to start taking questions in a few minutes. I have a couple questions that were passed to me up front, and a couple emailed in, and I actually don't want to read them because they were all almost the same way, and which was they all had to do with deal terms. What's preferred stock versus common stock? What's participating preferred versus non-participating? What's this thing called full ratchet? How do I get a term sheet? How do I compare? And I'd like you to kind of sum up this discussion, because none of you said almost anything about that when we talked about the deal and so on. And the question is, why? Why the entrepreneurs get so fixated? I got this list of stuff, like, well, how do I manage to convert convertible debt, and this? And I didn't hear any of you say any of that. And
But
why wasn't
so
that
much of that
important?
has become mechanical. I mean, we almost assume that an entrepreneur in this internet age, Google, Yahoo Finance, websites, if they haven't gone to nvca.org, National Venture Capital Association's website, and pulled down all the legal documents, term sheets, and warrant agreements that are now free on the web, downloadable, as a preparation for coming to the money, who they have to assume has lawyers and deals with the terms. The education of the entrepreneur is so available through the Kauffman Foundation sites, the Angel Capital Education Foundation, and eventuring.org. It's almost like if you read enough Inc. magazine and the websites and NVCA, you understand that investors are getting more concerned about protecting their ass, and that's why we're going to preferred stock. We get our money back before conversion, or
Dave, do you-
convertible debt. So all I'm saying is some of these tools, which we could talk ad nauseum, are available at tech councils, at websites, at entrepreneurship centers, so that you can come prepared to know what is the norm in the industry, and then it's a building block approach.
Dave, is it just
standardized.
mechanical, or do terms
Well,
matter?
it's a way for the venture capitalists to disguise the true valuation of the deal. And what I would,
Go, Dave.
Which is,
I mean, it's very easy to talk about valuation if it's just a number, right? But when you've got a whole bunch of other things that come into play, then it becomes incredibly complicated. And VCs spend their entire lives thinking about all these little machinations that they can put in the deal that actually changes the outcome when the company is sold, who gets how much and who gets how much. So I would recommend, you can go to the National Venture Capital Association website and you can understand how all these things work, but sit down with your term sheet and actually run out the numbers. How much will I make if the company is sold for $20 million, $10 million, $50 million, or whatever, and see how much you get and how much he gets, because there's all kinds of little things in participation and preferences and so forth and so on that come into play. And you have to be careful to make sure you put it out in time, because most of the term sheets today have time things in where the amount of money that the VC gets ticks up over time. And so you may be surprised, gee, if 5 years from now, even if I may get nothing and they might get it all.
And then,
Yeah.
and I think Cynthia said, layer into that, having to raise more money in 2 years before you do that, then do that calculation,
It's
right?
not just
Yeah,
this
that's
term.
right.
sheet,
It's
it's the
dilution.
eventual.
But
It's
you
the
really
follow-up.
sit down with a spreadsheet and run it out, because you'll be very surprised. You could get 2 term sheets for $5 million pre-money valuation or something like that for your company. And they got all this other stuff in there that's complicated that you don't actually understand real well. Figure it out, run the spreadsheet, and look at some scenarios, because you'll be really surprised what different
should
outcomes you can
but
get
back
with the
to what
same
you guys were
valuation.
saying before, if you had 2 term sheets at $5 million and there were some differences here and there, would those differences make you choose one over the other, or all the other things? Is it about price, or you just spend half an hour talking about relationships until there's the money? I love
Well,
you
the
until
money-
there's the money.
Yeah, the money comes first. And
It's what term sheet is
Yeah.
going to give you the most likely chance of success.
right.
And you've really got to look at it also from an entrepreneur's perspective. You do this once if you're lucky to swing the bat and try to get it out of the park. The investors have done many, many, many times, looked at folks like yourself. And so you learn it the hard way. But if you can talk to other entrepreneurs, you'll find out that it's the LILO method. LILO is the founder entrepreneur is classically the last, FILO, first one in
Last
and last
out.
one out. And also in these deals, you don't see the investors putting together any options for the founder entrepreneur to get preferred stock. But it's absolutely doable, especially if you have customers, revenue, and profits. You can deal on the same level of terms and not just settle for common stock that will be diluted in future rounds.
But wouldn't you agree it's important then to have advisors around you if you're this first time up at bat?
Yeah.
Not to do it naked and assume if you just read a lot, you'll be able to
Absolutely.
dance.
Sure.
We
Absolutely.
advise people to get as much help as they can on their side.
Yeah.
so that they're not going to be taken advantage of by.
And I think there's
Yeah.
an important thing too that's a learning when you bring in your significant funding is if you might be dealing with your law firm for many, many years, but when you close on that deal and you've brought in significant outside capital, your law firm is representing and consistently representing the company. So if you're wearing the hat looking after your own investment as an entrepreneur, you really need your own counsel to advise you to look at the investment from your own perspective as an investor, founder, entrepreneur, and not rely just on your counsel for the company, because that counsel's fiduciary responsibility and role and familiarity in doing deals is typically with companies like
find
Bob.
that deals work
And
better if
Bob,
both sides
Bob,
are
you get the
represented?
last point
I can
here,
make
and then
one
we're
last.
going to go to
Couple-
questions. So if you have questions, we got 2 microphones here, and we're going to take call-ins from other locations. So-
Couple comments on what I just said. If you
Come on up.
keep in mind, if you accept a term sheet for your first real round of financing and has a lot of heavy terms in it, but it's okay with you because you kind of like the investors, if you think you'll need to raise more money again 1 or 2 more times, the follow-on rounds are going to piggyback on the terms that are in the first term sheet. So if you accept a heavy set of terms like an accruing dividend and a participating preferred and full ratchet, be prepared that the investors a year later and the year after that are going to take the same terms, and that the weight of those extra terms builds, all right? The other thing you said, one of you said, what if you have 2 term sheets and one's a slightly different set of terms? Would you take the cheaper one? Now that's a very magical thing, 2 term sheets, all right? The 2 or more
if
than
you were
one.
to be so lucky.
You can
Dating.
when
It's
you
dating.
when you can get a horse race going, when you can get multiple parties
That's-
interested, then the 2 converge because you can negotiate and make
And we
each other.
found that if you're at the venture stage, having angels involved in the prior stage can support the entrepreneur dramatically in understanding
up.
the world and
Okay,
having
we
a
could
more
go on a long
sophisticated
time about
result.
term sheets. We got to go to questions. Let's start on this side of the auditorium, please. Could you say your name and then your question, please?
Hello. My name's Jonathan Letvin, and I just have a simple question. How do you, as investors, distinguish between the crackpot and the truly unorthodox risking much?
David, you said you couldn't hold a job. Are you unorthodox or a crackpot?
Well, speaking as a crackpot, yeah.
I'm sorry, say it again for the.
that's
Your
that's-
mic wasn't on when you said that. No, don't touch it.
Yeah, speaking as a crackpot, or at least an ex-crackpot, that's a very good question because a lot of the people who decide to become entrepreneurs are people who can't hold down a 9-to-5 job. They have no interest in it. It doesn't appeal to them, and and so almost by definition, they're going to be a little bit on the
Eccentric.
individualist
Eccentric, we usually
side,
say
let's say. So but you have to look. You have to look. I look at it as it's a practical thing. I mean, ultimately, a product gets sold to a customer, and the customer probably isn't going to be wild and crazy. The customer is probably going to be somebody who does have a 9-to-5 job, and so. It's nice to see somebody who's brilliant. It's nice to see somebody who's full of energy and completely wound up over their thing. But ultimately, it comes down to what is the product and why would somebody want to buy it?
Okay, so that's.
I have an answer to that, the crackpot versus unorthodox. My answer is multiple meetings. I never make an investment based on one meeting. So we're going to have multiple meetings to get to know each other better. A brilliant unorthodox person with a good idea will be consistent and hold it together across multiple meetings over a series of time. The crackpot won't. That'll
do your
come
diligence.
out in the second meeting or third meeting.
So we have a call from Mark
That's a good,
in
really
North
good
Carolina.
point, yep.
Mark?
Yes, you're talking about angel investors being individuals instead of institutions, and because of that, their expectations can change over time, and particularly over a matter of years. Might be a change in life situation, so their investment level of risk might change, things like that. And how, as an entrepreneur, do you deal with that in an individual as opposed to an institutional investor?
Okay, so the question is, how do you deal with changing expectations of individual versus institution? But I want to build on Mark's question when I ask Bob. Institutions change too,
Yeah.
and I've seen VC firms change radically. So can Bob and Cynthia, could you address Mark's questions about changing expectations?
Well, I would just say I think it's a really real thing, especially if there's a longer-term relationship. And, it may be time where that individual exits from the company if they want to move on, and it doesn't necessarily mean there's an exit for the deal. I also have seen venture firms decide to get out of that avenue of investing and pull their chips when there may be money on the table, but not
Bob, you
not
mentioned
5x
that
or 10x.
you mentioned
2x.
that in passing.
That issue about a venture firm also changing its stripes or attention to you, I think the biggest caution, pay attention to where the fund is in its life cycle. So a fund is raised for 10 years. They tend to deploy the money in the first 3 or 4. If you're one of the last deals in the 4th year, and then they're kind of done with that investing phase, and they're going to their next fund, you often might find yourself in that phase of the tastes of the firm have grown and changed. So
and
ask
James,
where they
with-
are.
you know, and I know as we run our angel groups, communication is everything. If we communicate well with the entrepreneur and they communicate well with us, then the surprises between the angel and the entrepreneur are mitigated. If you haven't talked to each other for a long time, those kinds
It's a
of
lot
issues
harder.
get you.
We have a call from Toronto. Greg from Toronto, your question. I guess the long distance line.
Delayed over
Yeah,
the
Greg,
border.
your question from Toronto?
Must be voice over
We,
IP.
you talked about multiple rounds of financing, and with angel investors not having the ability to potentially do multiple rounds of financing, do you find them investing in business plans that don't see their way clear to full cash flow and break even? In other words, fully funded business plans? Are angel investors stepping up to that kind of risk?
John? Can angel investors step up to the type
the
of risk?
structured angel groups are better in those situations because they have multiple investors. They've sophisticated enough to know they need multiple rounds, and they might even be there to help you hand it off to institutional or banking sources. I would definitely, if I'm in a non-major urban area and non-VC community, definitely have a long discussion between the entrepreneur and the angels about their staying power and the business person's ability to hit their numbers to avoid a lot of multiple rounds of investment, because that's one of the worst times to have a dialogue is I'm out of cash in a week and I have a gun to your head and you need to invest in me, and we go, but then here are the terms. So again, I think the more sophisticated groups are doing better at looking at your business plan and layering in.
And that sounds like that's been a
investment.
driver for groups, and Bob's comment earlier about individuals running out has been changing the market. So let's go over to this side of the auditorium, please.
Hi, I'm Bill Downing.
Bill, stand a little closer to the mic,
A little
please.
closer to the mic?
Yeah, there you go.
Bill Downing. I have a product development consulting house, and we're thinking about moving forward on some proprietary products. And I brought up a question with you, James, earlier tonight, and promised
you for reminding me of
I'd
it.
bring it up here at the microphone, and maybe it's related to this. And that is, how do you break up an investment into stages? For example, the proprietary product I'm working on now, it would be very helpful to have $100,000 to go ahead and prove the technology. It'll probably be another $500,000 to begin initial sales, and maybe $1 million to go nationwide. So do I go out to an angel network and say, we're going to need $1.6 million, or do I say, we need $100,000? Do I want to give you some idea about what those future needs are going to be? How would you try and structure that?
Yep, and I told Bill in advance, remind me of this question, because for those of you who are investors in the audience, this is as much an important issue for you as it is for entrepreneurs, is how do you stage the capital? John, you mentioned possibly
well, let me
running
start,
out.
But I'd like you to step in, not as the moderator, but running your group. I would definitely look at the 1.6. I would definitely have a dialogue about where we fit as an angel group or an individual angel or a super angel in that 1.6. And I'd have it very clear as to when we either need to help the entrepreneur bring that extra money in, or where we were going to turn it back to them and say, we're done, and it's time for you to help us go there. I mean, wouldn't you rather see the 1.6 plan?
Well, okay, to be devil's advocate, on the one hand, I want to see the 1.6 because I want to be able to see to break even. On the other hand, maybe it's too early because you need to answer a few questions.
There's a lot of people who just need $100,000 so that they can quit their job and spend a year in the lab, you know?
Figuring it out. And my advice in those situations usually is find a couple people who are really leaders in that particular industry for two reasons. First of all, they probably know and see your vision before most other generalist investors would. You know, it's not just you're in software, a very particular specific domain of software or telecom or real estate or whoever the expert is. And then two is they're likely to be able to attract the rest of the capital, so you're not going to be able to run out later. And that's usually the way to do it to the extent that you can. Again, Bob's point, you're lucky if you get one. Let's come over to here to this side, please.
My name is David Wallace. My business is Tenarbra Consulting. My job is finding working capital at the revenue stage for small and mid-sized businesses. My question is, how would I approach an angel or venture capital firm with regard for providing working capital services for the businesses they invest in, assuming that they're even around at the time when they get to revenue stage?
And just to be clear on the question, so the question is, how do you find working capital? How are you define working capital is a term of how proceeds are used. Are you talking about equity or debt or money that's going to be paid back?
Okay. I actually have access to businesses that provide secondary working capital businesses. I'm wondering is, how do I approach Angels Venture Capital about possibly providing the services of these funding sources to the businesses that they invest in?
John, you talked about
Well,
multiple
I was
sources.
going to turn this to Bob, because for the VCs, they don't want to probably get the kind of return that you get on some of the debenture kind of things. You want equity that has 10 times.
There's other sources for that.
So the angels would probably be more interested in this kind of funding source because
But you
it's
both talked about asking about criteria right up front. So one of the key questions is networking to find people who have that as a criteria, and asking them right up front instead of wasting time is.
Yeah, I mean, we'd want to know about these sources.
Yeah.
We'd want them to be available in every community, because we only want to do our kind of money.
Yep.
And what our job is to help introduce the entrepreneur to his sources.
And if once the VCs are involved, they tend to know less expensive sources of capital to support it after our stage too.
Okay, let's pick up the pace here. Let's go to the left side, please.
Hi, my name is Ruben Cummings. My question is in regards to a startup I'm working on. We're in negotiation talks to partner with an overseas firm. And I was wondering, would the terms of a partnership agreement that we come up with affect the chances of receiving angel or VC funding in the future? And to give you a little background, the basic terms of the deal that we're negotiating would be us receiving cash and services from this firm in exchange for equity in our company.
David, you've structured a lot of interesting deals.
I mean, it sounds to me like it's more like a strategic investment in a way.
Yes.
And, you know, I've had strategic investments. One of my previous companies, we had a big European telco that became the largest investor in the company, and it worked out great. It was by no means a detriment in terms of making the company attractive to a VC. You have to keep in mind that whatever the terms are in this arrangement, that in addition to the money and you giving them equity, that you're also not creating some roadblock that's going to be an impediment to somebody else coming in with a straight equity deal
So
later
back to
on.
this issue about thinking ahead and planning ahead.
Yeah.
But that sounds good.
A leads to B leads to C.
Okay,
and
let's
you have to
take
think it
another
through.
call here. Let's go to Rich from Indiana. Rich? Did we lose Indiana? Rich, are you there from Indiana?
Right here. One of our
Go Hoosiers. Yeah.
absolutely. One of our viewers here at Hammond Development has a question, which is, what do angel investors consider to be a fair rate of return on their investment?
Well, I think it'd be
Well, this has been a nice program, and
I think it'd be good to have all four of us answer that and see where.
I think I ought to have you write it down and then hold it up separately so you can't see each other's answers.
What
Remember,
we're
Cynthia
looking,
said, get the best terms you can.
what we're looking for is a risk-adjusted return on a limited portion of our portfolio that matches our social as well as financial rate of return. Which means
Did we
that
tell you John's from Washington, D.C.?
Thank you. Thank
I mean,
you.
that's...
The real answer is you have to find out from the source in front of you. You can't find it out from a book, from research. VCs can tell you that a seed fund has to do 60% compound rate of return, 10 times their money off the bat, or they don't do the deal. An angel is all over the map. So
David?
each of you could describe how you make your decisions.
Yeah, no, I don't think you can go into it with. I mean, all you can do is you can try to get the money from the angel. If the angel says no, then you've priced it wrong.
That's very.
I
Very
think that
empirical.
The,
I like
the
that.
market will speak is probably the most honest
Very
answer
Well,
there.
I think it all depends. You could look at 2x, you could look at 5x, 10x, but at the end of the day, I try to remind and one of the investors, no matter who it is, it never hurts to make a profit.
Yep.
Although one thing we ought to add on this, and Rich's question is a very good one to illustrate a contrast between institutional and individual investors. When you're an institutional investor, you may have some of your own money in the deal, but by definition, you have other people's money, which means you're getting paid on a management fee and a share of the profits almost universally. An angel gets the full return. So the math is just a little bit different. It is going to vary from person to person, but the compensation is a little bit different.
That's because Rob gets paid no matter what.
Next question.
Let's go to the right here, please.
Hello, my name is Arthur Mack, and I'm creating a business plan and also forming a team for an idea of mine on the transportation system business. So I got quite interested when you are arguing about the control issue, about it seems like the more money you try to get, the faster you want to grow, the more likely you're going to be fired from the CEO position, you're more likely to lose control of your company. And I'm just wondering, my question is, do you have any advice on reversing that formula?
No,
Cynthia?
Well,
So the question is, not everyone may have heard the question. The question is, we talked about losing control as the founder and a CEO. How do you reverse the formula to be able to maintain the CEO role and control?
If you need a lot of outside resources.
If you need a lot of outside resources.
And I think, one of the things that you have to be realistic is very, very few CEOs are the right formula for entrepreneurs, are the right formula for running the company or even being the scientific founder from zero stage all the way through the first 5 years or to that level of funding, first level of significant funding. And you have to be realistic. Is that person really, if you know thyself, is that person really the person that can ebb and flow and change to take that company public and, fly on the plane to Singapore and to Europe to go do the, investment banker pitches? It's very rarely is that one and the same person. So, how do you change that? I think one is to know thyself as an entrepreneur, to know what role you can best play in the company. And, it's also okay when you take a deal and to step into a role, if it depends again on what the control base is, but to step into a role as chairman and bring in a CEO that's going to add value and take the company to the next level.
We have just a couple minutes left. David, that was your point?
Yeah, I always aspire to get myself kicked up to chairman and bring in a CEO because a founder of a company can always be valuable to the company. The reason founders get kicked out because everybody else sees them as the wrong person for the job that they're doing at that time, and they can't see that themselves. But
now this is from someone who's founded 6 companies,
right?
So you seem to be good at getting kicked up to chairman.
But that's a great
But
goal.
you got to know. There's a difference between
goal.
having a vision and being a great evangelist for your business, and being the guy who can drive sales.
We have time for last question.
Good evening. My name's Ben Teich. I had a quick question about becoming an angel investor. If you're not the jet-setting, yacht-owning millionaire, if you're a working person with maybe a $500,000 to $1 million net worth, but it really intrigues you and interests you, is there a smart or intelligent way to go about becoming an angel investor?
John.
Actually, the Kauffman Foundation is, again, a wonderful source. They have a Power of Angel Investing seminar series that we help to instruct around the country. It's a one-day thing that is an amazing way of getting introduced to, getting strengthened, and get empowered.
And there are also materials at Angel Capital Education Foundation, angelcapitaleducation.org and angelcapitalassociation.org. But legal answer, he said $500,000.
We prefer to deal with, and most VCs and entrepreneurs like to deal with people who have $1 million in net worth and up, accredited investor.
That's an SEC definition.
But it doesn't matter if in the end you're going to write a $20,000 check, a $50,000 check from your net worth, you are as legitimate as any other angel. It's just you should probably have a portfolio theory. You probably should be able to do follow-on investing. So are you with $100,000 going to be able to do as much and learn as much as if you wait until you have some more horsepower? But we can find you some great educational sources, and we encourage. I am just amazed that we have so few angels in the United States compared to rich people. And what we want to do is get them, like you, feeling comfortable, learning how to do it, taking the risk, maybe getting some sweat equity for services, and then growing businesses, because the country is starved for innovation capital right now. And I think the VCs see that because of the need.
And at the moment, we're starved for time, so we are out. Thank you very much for coming. Let's thank the panel for participating. And we thank you for joining us here in Kresge. Have a good evening.